As of the time of this video being filmed, you have a few days left to back Mini Express and the expansion maps over on Kickstarter. Hey, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co, and this is a review of Mini Express. Just the base game. Like I said already, the expansion's on Kickstarter. I'll throw a link to that down below, and base game and all those things you can get your hands on it there. That is only partially related. Let's go ahead and dive into this game. Mini Express is a train stock-taking game, but in the most abstracted sense. The entire game distilled down to two actions that you take every single turn. Well, one of two actions that you take every single turn. You are either going to be laying rails across this map. You're either going to be laying rails across the map, adding trains to the board in order to create lines and slowly increase the various shares and influence of the companies, or you are taking stock in that company. That's all you're doing. You're either trying to acquire stock or you're trying to increase the network. And the reason you're doing these things is because the way you're going to win Mini Express by the time you're done is you're going to be looking at your influence on these tracks up over here and seeing who has the highest influence, the specific value of the specific stock and the company in question, and then determining the value of each of your shares. That's what you're doing here, and that might sound a drop confusing, but let's walk you through how this would play out if it were endgame. Let's say right now this is the situation, this is the board state, and over here, let's just go ahead and throw these over here, because it'll make a lot more sense if we do this, and then we do the game later, and just tossing up some numbers over here, and this is the current situation at the end of the game. At this point, or let's go ahead and toss these over here, and this over here, and this here, and that over there. Let's pretend this were the situation right now. Over here, red currently has the most value in this company. Therefore, red shares will be worth 7 each. And then blue shares will be worth 6 each because he has second most value in this company. Similarly on this track, over here blue shares will be worth 8, red shares will be worth 7. Over here on this track, blue shares are going to be worth over here 6, and then red shares are going to be worth 5. And then again, lastly over here, blue has the higher influence, so blue's going to have 5 points per share over here, and then red's going to have 4 points per share over there. So again, the influence of the track combined with the value of the company determines the value of the share within that hierarchy. Hopefully that makes sense. Which means, again, using this specific example, if we pretend for a second that red has 2 shares and blue has 3 shares of white over here. Over here, because of the value over here, red will have 2 times 7 or 14 worth of white, and blue will have 3 times 6 or 18 worth of white. So you're kind of trying to be mindful of 3 things. The value of the company, the value of your influence within that company, which will determine the value of your shares, and then the number of shares you have, which will then determine how many points you actually get per company. That's how you win the game. As far as the gameplay sequence, those actions you're taking, like I said already, you're doing one of 2 things. You're either taking a share or you are increasing the network across the board. When you take a share, you're going to look at this little sideboard down here. Now, normally this would be off the board. In fact, we're covering a location right now. That's just to have this all on camera. But you'd have this up to the side. And normally when you lay track on a location, what you're going to do is you're going to grab a number of trains from the specific pool over here. You're going to create a network. So let's say we're doing orange. Let's say we want to move orange from here to over here to Chicago. We have to make a network from the closest possible option we can. We cannot draw a line from over here because this would be not the closest. We have to draw from one of these 2 locations into Chicago. So we're going to put a train into Chicago for sure, but we also have to choose one of these 2 locations, and that is the player's choice. In this case, we're going to go ahead and grab this, no particular reason, or maybe there's a deep underlying strategy. When we do that, we're going to go ahead and increase our value in these 2 shares. So we're going to go ahead and let's pretend it's red's turn. Red's going to go ahead and bump up over here. Red's also going to bump up over here to try to get ahead of blue on that track over there. And that's what's going on as far as laying trains. That's the main action over there. There are a lot of nuances and adjustments to the lay trains action. There's some rules around how you have to go measure for closeness. If you're trying to measure from, if I'm trying to get from orange to over here, I have to look at the closest possible route, which would be any 2 trains. Because I can go from there, these 2 trains don't have to be this spot and this spot only, because anything else would be 3 trains to get there. So closeness is one thing you're evaluating. Additionally, you need to be mindful of which locations there are. Some cities can only have 1 train, some cities can have 2, and some cities can have 3 different networks in them. And being mindful of that, once Nashville has a train in it, you can no longer, let's go ahead and draw an actual line. If we draw an actual line to Nashville, at this point, you can no longer get another train into Nashville. Nashville will be done, we'll remove the demand token, we'll call that a day, and Nashville is fully taken. So you want to be mindful of that restriction, as well as the fact that when you draw through other trains, when you move through other trains to get somewhere, as a compensating factor, you're going to add another train to the supply over here. Whoops, sorry for knocking that over. You get another train to the supply on the sideboard whenever you go through other trains. That's another thing you're being mindful of. That's the main lay train action. The other action you have is the taking a stock action. Taking a stock is much simpler, but also much more expensive depending on how things play out. You see, when you take a stock, all you do is you simply reach over here, You grab any one stock from any one company, and then you pay influence equal to the number of trains remaining in the supply. So let's pretend Orange had gone ahead and done another train action over here, moving that over there, and we have one orange train left in the supply. If Blue currently takes an orange stock, what they're going to do is they're going to take an orange stock, and because there's one train left, they're then going to go ahead and lose one influence in Orange, moving down over there. They'll then add 3 more trains to the supply, always a maximum of 5 when you do that, and that's the taking a stock action. So once again, 2 actions in the game. You are either increasing the network and influence of the specific sequence of trains that you're trying to be mindful of, the company you think you have the most influence in, the company you think that is most beneficial to you, or you are taking stocks in order to go ahead and actually score those points, because at the end of the day, if you're getting 7 points or 8 points per stock, if you actually have the stock, it's going to be more points there. Rinse and repeat until you reach the end game, which involves companies running out of trains, then score everything up, and that is basically Mini Express. There are 2 sides to the board. I'm not going to flip this right here. There are 2 sides to the board, as well as some small rules adjustments you can choose to voluntarily include within those games, and that's the game. And then, of course, the Kickstarter adds 2 new maps. You can check that out if you want. But from there, let's go ahead and dive into the review. Starting off with ease of play. Rulebook for this game is very small, very accessible, and most of what you have is unnecessary extras. So as far as the rules go over here, we have the setup over there, we have a setup over here, there we go, sequence of play, and we have like 3 pages before you get to like unnecessary stuff. Endgame, 4 pages of rules, and then you get to like various varieties and solo games and all the various modules. Rules are very easy to dive into because of the fact that you only have 2 actions. Everything you do in this game is just 2 actions. You're either increasing the network, which has some complexities around it, or taking stock in a company. That's all you're doing. Past that, it comes down to the endgame scoring. The core gameplay sequence is very simple, very accessible. You're going to have the randomized setup nature of having all these tokens in different areas, trying to balance around there. You have the other maps, as well as the small modules you can adjust, but a very easy game to dive into. Some small elements can be a drop confusing, or I would just say non-intuitive, but I would say overall the rule set is small enough that even though elements of it are non-intuitive, you can really just get a few turns up and running and just understand within a few turns how the game plays. As far as player count, this is an interesting one because this is a 1 to 5 player game that I've played this one at 2 and 3 players. Board Game Geek has the ratings of what this plays best with all over the place. If you look at them, all ratings, all player counts are rated as being best with, and I don't necessarily know how that ties into it. I will say that for me, this is definitely a game I would only play at 2 players. We'll get more into that, into the what I like, don't like, and conceal as not liking, but for me, there's a specific flaw in the game that does not manifest itself at 2 players, but does manifest itself at any other player count, which for me makes this a very, very strongly a 2-player experience. As far as what I like, don't like, and conceal as not liking, starting off the bat with what I like. This is a quick and easy stock-taking game. Stock, train-taking game. This is a game that distills the core concept of a train game and stocks and the values and the shares and all those and building a network and managing all that. It distills all of that into a very core, simple concept of 2 actions. That's all it is. It's 2 actions. It's quick to play. It's quick to teach. The game plays in about like 30 to 45 minutes. This game is very easy to table, very easy to play, very easy to explain. It has all of that while still maintaining the overall feel of one of these larger games. It gives you an accessible package to a larger train-taking game. It's a good gateway stock train taking engine. Engine being, I guess, the key word there. And the choices are very present as you figure out how to grow your influence in different ways. As you figure out how to expand the map, how to move around the map in different ways, how to move up the tracks over here, of how to get the things you want, of which networks to cut off, of how to force somebody to try to build through a network, forcing trains into there to give you better options. There's a lot of small but important decisions you're going to make within those 2 actions. And there's lots of control in what you're doing if you're playing it as a 2-player game. There's a lot of control in trying to be mindful of how everything enmeshes together as you make, again, just 2 actions. All you're doing. Are you taking a share or are you expanding track? And if so, in which companies? Where are you willing to give up influence? Where is it important for you to get ahead? Where are you fighting so hard to be higher in the track, but you're doing so at the cost of a share, and maybe just getting another share would be better for you instead? It's a very quick and easy game that gives you a lot of agency and control if you're playing it at 2 players. I keep harping on that because we're going to go to the things I don't like, which we'll start off with one thing which is not that big a deal, which is the board spots over here can get fairly cluttered fairly quickly. As you're adding in all the trains over here, this can get very messy as everything starts expanding outwards, and it can get harder and harder to see. It's just a very small map, very small board, lots of trains cluttering everything up, and it can become hard to see. That's more of a nitpick. For me, the real complaint against Mini Express is the fact that if you're playing this game at anything other than 2 players, there is so much control or choice that you're setting up players for moves. This entire game comes up to not giving the other players other moves, and other players not giving up moves to you. because of the way that you'll deplete the train engine market, because of the way you'll set someone up to take a share, because of the way you'll add more trains, everything you do has such a huge effect on the player following you directly that at any player count other than 2, it almost feels like an unfair experience. It almost feels like, okay, great, congratulations, you won because you got set up for the win. Congratulations, you know, you didn't play the game well, you just got set up time and time again. The other player gave you good moves, the other player gave you shares, and the cycle of 3 players or 4 players or 5 players just resulted in me not getting what I ever needed because of how important the I believe it's called left-right binding when it happens in games. The idea of how tied together the players are as they play. For me, I would not play this at any player count again other than 2 because I think 2 gave me all the highs of the game, versus 3 gave me the same highs but with a lot less feeling of agency and control over my own destiny as I actually played. As far as I can see others not liking, first of all, it is a simple game. I said that already, it is, but I think it's reasonably confusing for how simple it is. Which is a weird thing to say. This game is easy and accessible and easy to table and teach and play and all those things, but also it's confusing. Yes. Yes is the answer. This game is simple and easy, but I would say the core rules are incredibly simple and easy, like this much, and there's a degree of confusion around how some things play out. It might be a bit much as far as how simple yet non-intuitive the game is at the same time. And secondly is I'd say this game falls into a weird spot. This game falls into a weird spot of having the dryness of a stock train-taking game without the level of depth that a stock train-taking game generally has. It manages to have that feeling of what you're trying to do here, which is something, for some people, is a very good thing, but I think also for those people, it's usually something that you want with a lot more of an intense rule set, and this is aiming to be very accessible for better or for worse. As far as final thoughts on Mini Express, overall I enjoyed this game. Overall I enjoyed Mini Express. I thought it did a good job distilling. I'm not an expert at the genre, to be very clear, but I've played other games in it, anything from the Martin Wallace Steam games, or the Steam, or Age of Steam, Railway, what's the other one? It's the big box one, Railways of the World. I've played Chicago Express. I've played a few others in the general genre, but I am not an expert in this genre at all. There are a lot of games out there that you can play, and I've only lightly dipped my feet into it. But it did give me the overall feeling of that genre. It did give me the choices and the agency and the control while doing so in a very accessible package, but it also did so while being a little lighter on the decision space than I would like. There's choice, there's decisions you make, but it is lighter compared to other games, and it did so while being a game that I would only ever really play at 2 players because of that left-right binding problem. So for me, this one's a 3.5 out of 5. I like it, I enjoy it, but it also falls short of being a better or more amazing or more encapsulating game at the same time. As far as other game recommendations, first of all, Chicago Express, which I mentioned already. This game to me felt most similar to Chicago Express from the other various train games I've played. It felt like an easier, more accessible version of it, but I also think I'd rather play Chicago Express. And then if you're looking for another lighter, accessible train game, Iberia Engage from Capstone Games is going to fall into that category, while being a game that actually I think does work significantly better at higher player counts. In any case, and until next time, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co. Hope you enjoyed this video, and as always, I hope you have a good one.